The title of our message this afternoon is Christians and the Collapsing Dollar. And as Bill had mentioned, I recently signed a deal to write a book on the decline of the American economic empire. Many would probably argue whether America fits the definition of an empire. But what is not arguable at all is the fact that the most minute shifts in the economic policies, in the foreign or domestic policies, or even changes in the American military have instant effects upon the globe. And as much as we hate to admit it, economic empires like the U.S. operate much like the laws of physics. When you throw something up in the air, what happens to it? It comes right back down. And we see this all throughout history. We've seen empires rise, and we've seen empires fall. I have a few examples here on the slides. First of all, we have, of course, Egypt that rose up. Egyptian empire rose and dominated for a while, and then they gave way to the Assyrian Empire. Of course, the Assyrians fell to the Babylonians, and of course the Babylonians fell, according to the book of Daniel, to the Medes and the Persians. And then we have the Greeks, led by Alexander the Great, taking down the Medes and Persians, of course toppled eventually by Rome. And then we have the Holy Roman Empire. And we have the Ottoman Empire and the British Empire. And now today we have the American economic empire. I have three goals for this afternoon's discussion, and I have them right here for you. Number one, to explain the challenges facing the declining U.S. dollar. Number two, to see what the Bible has to say regarding this decline. And thirdly and finally, to find out what this decline means to you and your family, and to see what you can do about it. And as we go through this, I want you to keep a couple of things in mind. Despite what the Western-centric mind has to say regarding all of this, the Bible is absolutely clear. The ancient writings of the Christian Bible are crystal clear. They confirm that the biblical prophecies of old concerning the last days are Israel-centric. They're Middle Eastern-centric. They're not Western-centric, and they're not America-centric. They're anything but America-centric. God's Word clearly states that the spotlight in the very last days, the global stage, will be firmly transplanted to the volatile region of the Middle East, just prior to Christ's return. So number one, it is not America-centric, the Bible. Secondly, as Christians, we must come to terms with the fact that man is incapable of ruling man. You know, if history is a guide to anything, it is a guide to the consistent knucklehead acts of man throughout the ages. Mankind's problems and predicaments stem from the fact that man was never designed to rule himself. He was not meant to rule himself. He was meant to be ruled by God alone. But when man rejected God's sovereignty, when he rejected God's authority in the garden, he opted then for self-rule. And this ancient act of rebellion has led to 6,000 years of pain and suffering. This also explains why the 20th century was the bloodiest century on record, according to history. Interestingly, also called the American century. And unfortunately, America is traveling the same path as every empire that's traveled before it. Lest we confuse ourselves, Western Christians must quickly grasp this point that America is not the light of the world. The sun shone before America was here, and the sun will shine afterwards, even after our self-inflicted demise. America has made its own bed. It has sowed and it will reap. Its fall is historically identifiable, even though it's unfortunate. And its fall is all but certain. When we consider some of the economic trends that point to this impending day of reckoning, we see that the U.S. has actually outsourced the majority of its domestic manufacturing to foreign countries. Those of you who are in the manufacturing industry, you can testify to this. You can see this. We've opted instead of specializing in manufacturing, we've turned to consumption. We specialize in consumption now. And this specialization in consumption has led to for the first time in many years, in fact, I think at all, and I think it was in 2004, 2005, we actually had a negative savings rate, a personal savings rate. Actually dipped below zero. It also meant that the U.S. credit industry now, the credit card industry, the whole credit industry, has become larger and takes in more revenues than the U.S. manufacturing industry. This is a buy now, pay later mentality that we've seen infect America. And it did not originate with the American consumer. It was encouraged by the biggest consumer of us all. and that is the U.S. federal government. In 1945, the U.S. was the greatest creditor nation in the whole world. Today, it's the greatest debtor nation in all of world history. Today, the U.S. national debt stands at a whopping $9 trillion. And I have a slide to illustrate this for you. If we were able to take the U.S. national debt, $9 trillion, and if we took a dollar bill and we were actually to hold it out and actually go sideways with it, this is a 20, of course it doesn't really matter, but a dollar bill, if we were able to take a dollar bill and turn them this way and then link them together in a chain like this long ways, they would go from the sun all the way out to Saturn. That is how large our national debt is. $9 trillion. And honestly, I'm just getting used to millions. I don't know about you. Trillions it's hard to even imagine. Now here's what happens. Only $9 trillion, that's really only, because when we factor, if anyone in this room desires Social Security, if anyone in this room desires to reap the benefits of Medicare, if anyone desires any of the promised future obligations that the government has voted in, that number climbs, according to the Government Accountability Office, David M. Walker, to $59 trillion. And so that we would take that chain of dollar bills and we would still hold them sideways, but they wouldn't go to Saturn. They would go from the sun all the way out to Pluto. It's enough to make you laugh or it's enough to make you cry. But it's really just plain immoral for our nation to be in so much debt. Today, American politicians promise the unborn grandchildren's money to pay for the luxuries of the grandparents. You know what it's like? It's just like someone going into a restaurant and making the claim, hey, give me everything on the menu. I want a bottle of wine, I want the nicest steak, I want the mashed potatoes with garlic, and I want a great cheesecake at the end of it. And by the way, put that on my unborn grandchild's bill. Put it on his tab. That's immoral. But of course, it's easier to borrow from our future than it is to demand sacrifice from the living. And this lack of sacrifice can be clearly seen in corporate America. It can be clearly seen in our governments. And unfortunately, this spirit of unsacrificial living has found its way like a river of deception right into America's churches, when the most widely read Christian book in America is called How to Become a Better You. And that's a whole other message, Bill. I'm going to stay away from that one. This lack of sacrifice is even seen in our modern wars. Today's politicians begin wars that are fought without an appeal to national sacrifice. So very different from yesteryear. So very different. Well, if we go back to World War II, for example, we see President FDR, Roosevelt. And what did he do in World War II? What did he do? He ended the production of new automobiles. He ended the production of new homes. He ended the production of new appliances. Why? Because he was trying to free up American manufacturing for what? For the war. Gasoline was rationed. War bonds were sold. And in contrast, at 9/11, 2001, George Bush stood on the television before us all and said, what was his answer? To go shopping. To travel. To take vacations. To go to Disney World.